81-year-old veteran's incredible story revealed. Son's life-changing rescue with Hell's Angels. Hank Thompson woke each morning to the soft rustling of leaves and the golden light spilling through the curtains of his quaint Midwestern home. At 81, the shadows of his past loomed large, but the true weight pressed upon his heart came from the absence of his beloved wife, Margaret. Their home was quieter now, a sanctuary of memories wrapped in the scent of fresh tomatoes and daisies from his beloved garden. As summer evenings rolled in, neighbors would gather for barbecues, laughter echoing through the streets, but Hank felt like an outsider looking in, a solitary figure in a brightly colored world. Across town, his son Jake labored as a mechanic in a small garage, wrestling with bills and the pressure of holding up his father's revered legacy. The stories of Hank's bravery echoed through their town, tales of valor from the Vietnam War that earned him admiration, yet Jake felt a chasm growing wider between them. Each day, the weight of expectation seemed heavier, leaving Jake yearning to escape the overwhelming responsibility of being Hank's son while trying to forge a better life for his two children. Rumors began to swirl, whispers that Hank's cherished home was at risk due to mounting legal troubles. The fear of losing the last tangible piece of his life without Margaret gripped Hank. Jake, desperate and angry at the world, was caught off guard when a chance encounter led him to the chaotic world of the Hells Angels. Initially hesitant, Jake soon learned the club had an unwavering loyalty to veterans. It was a shocking twist of fate that ignited hope in the bleakness surrounding him. As they banded together, a motley crew of bikers began to weave through the fabric of Hank's past. Dusty books were pulled off the shelves, revealing secrets Hank had buried deep, stories of camaraderie and sacrifice that painted him not just as a soldier, but a survivor. Jake listened, transfixed, as Hank revealed a storied history he had never shared, tales that conjured tears and laughter side by side. Under the watchful eyes of those rough-around-the-edges bikers, Jake began to see the strength in vulnerability. Their bond sharpened amid challenges, illuminating what had always gone unspoken between father and son. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Just as hope began to flicker in their hearts, a shocking revelation cast a shadow over their newfound bond. Hank's wartime heroism had become tangled in a legal quagmire that sent ripples through their tight-knit community. The very same people who once admired him began to question his integrity, murmurs rising like storm clouds above a once clear sky. Jake stood at a crossroads, his hands clenched at his sides, feeling the weight of judgment bearing down on him. Could the truths he unearthed strengthen their ties or unravel the very fabric of their lives? In the silence that followed, Hank's heart raced with fear and resolve, torn between the love for his family and the ghosts of his past. Together, they would have to face the storm brewing around them, armed with nothing but love and the hope for redemption. The question lingered in the air: could they reclaim their dignity and place in the community, or were they destined to remain shadows of their once glorious legacy? Hank stood at the edge of his garden, the late afternoon sun casting a golden hue across the rows of tomatoes and vibrant daisies. The scents of summer lingered in the air, yet they felt stale and uninviting. He clenched his fists, his heart heavy with dread. The whispers swirling around town felt like a storm ready to break. The news of his legal troubles had spread faster than wildfire, igniting uncertainty and speculation. Jake arrived home, grease staining his hands, but it was the worry in his eyes that spoke volumes. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, his tone sharper than usual. Hank could see the turmoil churning within him. He nodded, gesturing Jake to follow him inside. The living room felt too quiet as they settled into worn chairs, the familiar creaks of the old house echoing their unspoken fears. "I heard a lot of people talking today," Jake began, searching for the right words. "They're saying you took money, that something's not right." Hank's heart sank. "It's all lies, Jake. I never—" "Those aren't just rumors, Dad. They're ready to turn their backs on you," Jake interrupted, the tension in his voice rising. "What if they find out about the past, the stuff you told me?" As those words hung between them, Hank felt exposed, as if the walls themselves were closing in. Those stories he'd shared weren't just tales of bravery, but swathed in guilt and risks that could unravel everything. Outside, the rumble of motorcycle engines rose up, a familiar sound that once filled Hank with pride. Now, it felt ominous. The Hells Angels, who had offered support, could only do so much against the tide of public opinion. Hank knew they had his back, but could they stand against the weight of suspicion? "Look, Dad," Jake's voice softened, "we need to hit this head on. Maybe if we talk to them, get ahead of the gossip." Hank shook his head, the sadness in his eyes deepening. "Some things need to remain buried, son. I fought for my life out there, and I thought I left it all behind. I didn't." He stopped, his voice choking. "I didn't want you to carry this burden." "But I want to help," Jake said urgently, leaning forward. "Aren't we allowed to fight for each other, together?" With those words, something shifted in Hank. The vulnerability he began to embrace had the power to shatter their silence. "I've built this wall to protect you, to keep you away from the darkness I faced," he admitted, his voice breaking as tears welled. "But it only created a bigger gap." Feeling the connection attempt to bridge the chasm, Jake reached out, grabbing his father's hand. "We can face this storm, Dad, just like you faced those battles." With a newfound determination, Hank realized that perhaps it was time to confront his past, not entirely alone or in shame. He needed to trust Jake, to invite him into the heart of his struggles instead of trying to shield him from them. "We'll go together, visit the Hells Angels. We tell them everything. They can help us," Hank said, his voice steadier. As Jake nodded, a flicker of hope ignited, pushing through the weight of despair. Yet uncertainty still hung in the air, looming like a dark cloud. Were they ready to lay it all bare? Their agreement lingered, heavy and electric, hinting at challenges ahead. Hank looked into Jake's eyes, which sparkled with resolute courage. "This is just the beginning, huh?" he asked softly. "Yeah, Dad, the beginning." Jake smiled faintly, but it didn't mask the worry etched on his face. What would they face next? Would the community's acceptance follow this plunge into vulnerability? The road ahead was perilous and uncharted. Hank felt the sun slipping further below the horizon as he and Jake prepared to leave the house. Each step toward the motorcycle felt heavier, the weight of unspoken fears clinging to their shoulders. The thick air of anticipation buzzed around them, a mix of dread and determination. As they neared the garage, Hank paused, looking back at the small house he'd poured his heart into. It stood with a defiant, sturdy stance, like him, weathered yet resilient. "You ready for this?" he asked Jake, who was busy wiping grease from his hands. Jake nodded, but his brow furrowed, revealing the nervous bond they now shared. Hank took a deep breath, a blend of hope and anxiety flooding his chest. He turned the key, and the garage door opened with a rumble, revealing the gleaming motorcycle, a symbol of both freedom and the past he couldn't escape. The ride to the Hells Angels clubhouse was tense. Hank gripped the handlebars tight, his knuckles turning white. The wind whipped past them, a chaotic mix of excitement and fear. "You okay back there?" he yelled over the roar of the engine. "Yeah, just keep riding," Jake shouted, the adrenaline pumping through him. Hank couldn't help but glance back, seeing Jake's eyes light up with the thrill, but also a flicker of uncertainty. They might be diving into the unknown together, but the mystery of what awaited them sat heavily in his mind. When they pulled into the gravel lot of the clubhouse, a familiar sense of camaraderie pulled at Hank. The roar of engines and bursts of laughter filled the air, reminding him of who he was and what he once stood for. Yet today, that familiarity felt overshadowed by the gravity of their shared mission. Rubbing the back of his neck, Hank dismounted the bike and took a moment. He reminded himself why he needed to do this, Not just for him, but for Jake. They stepped inside, the low buzzing chatter fading momentarily as they crossed the threshold. The room was lined with leather jackets and proud faces, some old friends, some new. Hank's heart raced, each heartbeat echoing doubts in his mind. Would they support him? Would they cast him aside as others had? "Hey, Hank, didn't expect to see you here," shouted one of the old members, booming laughter following his greeting. Hank forced a smile, waving hesitantly. He felt Jake's hand grip his shoulder, steadying him. "Can we talk?" Hank asked, his voice cracking a bit. Whispers around the room hushed, drawing eyes from across the space. Jake felt the shift, squeezing his father's shoulder tighter. Several heads nodded, and Hank was led to a back table where the leaders gathered, their presence filling the air with authority and the weight of old memories. Hank swallowed hard. "I need your help," he began, the words spilling from him in a mix of urgency and vulnerability. Jake stepped closer, determination on his face. It was now or never, and as Hank locked eyes with his son, he felt a surge of courage coursing through him. The stories would come pouring out, the past laid bare. His heart hammered against his chest as he began to recount the dark chapters he had tried to bury. The silence in the room was palpable, as if the weight of every secret he shared hung in the air, waiting for judgment. But the moment Hank finished, a weight lifted. The old-timers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from shock to an understanding that only years of hardship could foster. "Everyone has a past," a voice rumbled from the end of the table. "What matters is what you do with it." Hank felt a flicker of hope ignite. Perhaps this was the acceptance they had been searching for. But at the same time, the tension remained. Would this be the moment that shifted tides, or merely another glance in the rearview mirror? As conversations began to swirl around them, Hank realized he had crossed a threshold. He looked at Jake, who was watching him with bright eyes, pride and relief washing over his face. Together, they faced the unknown. But just then, a voice rang out from across the room, the bluster of a newcomer interrupting the flow. "So you think we care about your past?" Hank's heart sank once more. The backlash they feared? The road ahead twisted and turned, revealing more than they had bargained for. What other secrets lay waiting in the shadows? Hank's heartbeat quickened. The room turned heavier, and all eyes shifted to the newcomer, a young man clad in a leather jacket that looked too big for him. His attitude dripped with overconfidence. Hank felt the tension like a coiling spring ready to snap. "Calm down, kid," one of the older members replied, rising to the tension. "This isn't your circus." The young man sat back, crossing his arms and glaring at Hank. "Yeah, but why should we care? We're not your therapist." Hank's throat felt dry, but he forced himself to meet the young man's gaze. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for a chance to make things right, for my son." Jake shifted beside Hank, his fingers digging into his father's arm. "We're not here to cause trouble," he said, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "We're looking for support for my dad." The older man who had defended Hank surveyed the atmosphere, his expression much softer than the kid's. "You're brave to come here, Hank, but understand, trust isn't given freely. You have to earn it." Silence fell over the group, each member processing Hank's words. The air grew thick with the murmur of judgment, cautionary whispers hinting at the seriousness of what Hank had laid on the table. Would they respect his attempt to step back into the light, or would the shadows consume him whole? Suddenly, an enormous figure emerged from the back. It was Big Joe, the president of the chapter. He was an intimidating presence, but there was a peculiar warmth in his demeanor. He approached Hank, the collective tension pulling tighter like a spun wire. "Hank," he said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You've been absent for too long. You think we don't remember what you did for us? You stood by us when others wouldn't. You risked everything back then." Hank's heart swelled. I know I wasn't perfect, Joe. I made errors, but I'm here to fix it. I want to fight for my family now." The young man rolled his eyes, unimpressed, crossing his arms even tighter. Sounds like a lot of empty words. Joe shot a look at the kid that made him shrink back. "You'll learn, kid. Everybody has demons. Hank's voice isn't just empty talk. It's a life's worth of battle." He turned back to Hank, softer now. "You brought your son. That's your first step." Encouraged by this glimmer of understanding from Joe, Hank pushed forward. "I need help. There's a man after us, someone who won't let my son and I live in peace. I thought you guys could, well, protect us?" The room fell silent again, the weight of Hank's words dawning on everyone. Hank could feel the shift as they all considered asking themselves how far they would go for a brother in need. Hesitation flickered among the members as old loyalties and present conflicts collided. A hand clapped on Hank's shoulder, firm but reassuring. It was Joe again. "It won't be easy, but we'll help. We don't leave our own behind." Jake breathed a sigh of relief. Hank felt lighter, the burden easing off his chest. But the young man scoffed loudly, catching everyone's attention once more. "Whatever. Just wait until you realize you've brought a ghost into your midst. Old folks can't change." Hank's face hardened. He could feel the weight of those words sink into them like stones. Who was this kid to judge? But before he could respond, Joe stepped in again, his deep voice like a rolling wave. "Everyone has their past, but it's how we come together that defines us. Kid, you're all talk." Hank took a deep breath. And in that moment, he realized perhaps they weren't just facing a threat outside, but also within their circle. Maybe unity would be more complicated than he had hoped. As the meeting began to unfold, Hank wondered, could they truly rally together, a band of warriors against the darkness closing in? What would this new alliance truly mean? And as Hank searched the faces in the room, he felt a haunting question linger in his mind. What sacrifices would they all have to make to safeguard their future? Hank's thoughts raced as the chatter in the cramped room resumed, punctured by the occasional laugh and the clinking of glasses. Joe had brought them together, but the tension lingered like smoke. The younger members eyed Hank and Jake at the far end, suspicion glazing their expressions. Hank could sense the skepticism, a palpable barrier that would take more than words to dismantle. "Forget the kid," Jake whispered, trying to be reassuring as he brushed against Hank's side. "We're here now, right? That's what matters." Hank nodded, but doubt gnawed him. The mention of ghosts cut deeper than he wished to admit. They had their own pasts and scars, burdens they all carried. Would they ever believe he could change? With Big Joe as their anchor, the heaviness in Hank's chest lightened just enough for him to push himself upright. "I have to show them I mean it," Hank decided. If respect was to be earned, he would start now. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I don't know how I can prove myself," he said, raising his voice to reach the entire group. "But I'll do whatever it takes. If it means we face threats together, share our stories, then let's do that." A murmur rippled through the members, heads nodding and eyebrows lifting in curiosity. But their hesitation remained, a protective shell around their collective history. Jake gazed up at his father, worry etched on his features. "Are you sure?" "More than ever," Hank replied, determination flooding him. He had faced demons before, none scarier than those that threatened his son's safety now. Joe stepped forward again, looking at Hank like a father. "We've all fought to earn our place here, Hank. Let's start by sharing our stories. We all have scars. Maybe it's time to lay them bare." The young man, still skeptical, frowned. "And what's that gonna do? Stories won't stop a guy with a vendetta." "Maybe not," Hank said, meeting his gaze boldly, "but facing them together might. You think every member here hasn't faced their own dark hour? Every scar tells a tale of survival." The tension crackled again, each person weighing Hank's words. Stories were shields and swords. and sharing them created bonds that could withstand the most ferocious storms. Slowly, one older member began to share a painful tale from a battle long fought, a reminder that everyone had pasts they wished to keep buried. As secrets spilled like ink on paper, Hank felt a sense of belonging washing over him. It was in these shared moments that clarity emerged, drawing lines in the darkness. They may have each been fractured, but as their narratives braided together, they started to see the cracks fading, replaced by trust. Time slipped away. Hank watched each face transform as walls lowered, smiles replacing frowns, laughter replacing skepticism. Even the young man, who had bitterly crossed his arms at the beginning, softened slightly. Perhaps understanding had sparked amidst their collective trauma. But just as the mood lightened, a loud bang echoed outside, a motorcycle engine revving aggressively, followed by the high-pitched screech of tires. Gasps emanated from various members, eyes darting toward the door. Hank's heart raced again, fear coursing through him. Was it the man hunting them? Joe stood upright, eyes focused and steady. "Everyone, stay alert. We've got to know if that's business as usual or something else." Hank's stomach twisted. Could they truly defend themselves? Would the bonds they had forged in that moment be enough against what lurked beyond those doors? Hank felt his breath quicken. This was only the beginning. They had just started to unite. But would it be enough? And as the roar outside grew louder, Hank couldn't shake the feeling that danger was not just at their doorstep, but breathing down their necks. Would they stand firm together, or would the shadows of their pasts rise once more to tear them apart? The screeching tires faded momentarily, but the sound of revving engines remained a relentless thrum in Hank's chest. He exchanged glances with Jake, his son's eyes wide with uncertainty. A flicker of fear danced across the faces of the other members. They were not warriors in uniform now. They were just people, caught in a moment teetering on the edge. "Get ready," Joe commanded, the authority in his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Hank stood, his heartbeat thumping heavily in his ears. He felt for Jake, grabbing his arm for reassurance. "Stay close," he whispered, forcing a smile to ease his son's nerves. But the knot in his stomach twisted tighter. The door swung open, and the cold air rushed in. Time seemed to suspend. Outside, two motorcyclists in leather jackets loomed like dark clouds against the fading light. The Harley's chrome glinted ominously, and the smell of fuel mixed with danger hung in the air. The young man who had been skeptical earlier took a cautious step forward. "What do they want?" he whispered, staying near the wall. "Only one way to find out," Hank replied, his throat dry. Joe stepped out into the dusk, commanding presence and unyielding. "What's the meaning of this?" he called, his voice ancient and polished like the metal of a well-kept blade. One of the bikers grinned, revealing missing teeth, a face lined with stories that could probably rival their own. "Just making some noise, old man," he barked, but then his eyes darted over to Hank and Jake. "Heard rumors about you lot. Figured we'd check it out." Hank felt a surge of pride and fear mix within him. Here they were, his newfound family against the shadows of their pasts. "And what is it you're looking for?" Hank asked, stepping closer to Joe's side, resolving to stand firm beside him. The biker leaned back, his posture lazy but eyes alert. "Just curious about the newcomers. Heard you've got a history. Interesting stories, maybe." "What's it to you?" Joe replied, a low growl forming in his voice. Hank could see the tension twisting in the air. The brewing storm could unleash at any moment. He stepped forward, drawing all eyes. "We all have demons," Hank said, his voice steady. "But I don't want trouble. We're just trying to build something here." The group of bikers exchanged glances. They seemed to consider his words, the elder biker's smile fading as he scanned the ragtag crew behind Hank. "Building something, huh?" the biker said thoughtfully. "Not the kind of thing we get to see much around here. Not in a long time." Hank could feel a shift, but he wasn't naive. Trust didn't come easy in this world. Would they see them as potential allies or a threat? Just then, the younger member, who had been quiet until now, bravely stepped up. He pointed at the bikers, indignation flaring in his voice. "You can't just come here and pry down our doors," the biker laughed. "Kid, that's the way this world works. You want peace? You gotta be prepared to stand for it." Hank's stomach dropped. "And what do you know about peace?" he challenged, the words tumbling from his mouth before he could catch them. Suddenly, the laughter faded. The bikers exchanged glances again, and the elder one nodded slowly. "Maybe we can teach you a thing or two, if you're willing to listen." Hank's heart raced. What were they getting themselves into? Would they forge an alliance or stumble into a conflict they couldn't escape? As the firelight flickered in the background, illuminating the tense faces around him, Hank understood they were at a crossroads. It was about more than just stories now. It was about trust. Could they truly face their pasts together? Or would darkness again fracture them, as it had so many times before? The roar of the engines lingered like a challenge in the air. Hank felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he stood on the brink of what could change everything. "All right," he said finally, swallowing hard. "Let's talk." But even as he spoke, an uneasy question loomed. What price would they have to pay for their newfound courage? The fire crackled behind them, throwing erratic shadows on the walls. Hank could feel the weight of the biker's eyes on him, piercing through the tension like blades. "We're listening," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. Joe stepped slightly to the side, keeping a watchful eye on both the bikers and the group gathered behind Hank. He wanted to signal strength, a show of unity that, despite their trembling fear, they were ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. "See," the elder biker said, leaning in closer, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. "This place used to be something. A sanctuary, if you will. But it's fallen apart like so many others." He glanced back at the younger biker, who was still on edge, ready to pounce at the slightest provocation. "Sanctuary," Hank echoed, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. What could a bunch of rough riders know about peace? But he kept his mouth shut, eager to hear more. "Yeah," the biker continued, "we're not here to poke holes in your walls. We're looking for something. A community, a place that isn't scared to stand up anymore. Could be a good trade, you know. We help you out, you help us out." Jake clutched Hank's arm, his small fingers digging into him like talons, drawing him back to the moment. "What do you want from us?" Jake asked, his voice trembling. "Don't sweat it, kid," the younger biker said, raising his palms in an attempt to soothe. "We don't want nothing except respect, in exchange for a little muscle and comfort." Hank could see it in their eyes. This was more than a business proposition. It was a plea. These bikers, hardened by life's trials, had tasted loss and were hungry for more than just survival. "Okay," Hank ventured, cautious but hopeful. "If we're doing this, we need some ground rules. No violence, no intimidation. We've already been through enough." "Fair enough," the elder biker nodded, his smile hinting at mischief. "But listen, we can't just stand around campfire hot chocolate. We have conflicts. You've seen the world out there. If you want to play this game, you better be ready for it." Hank let those words sink in. They all knew what he meant. Tension simmered as communities crumbled under pressure. "Then let's figure out how. Why don't we start with what we can share instead of what do we lose?" The bikers shifted, glancing at each other. Hank could see the uncertainty flash across their faces, as if they were weighing the decision in a delicate balance between pride and pragmatism. This wasn't just about business. It was about digging into each other's wounds, understanding the scars that ran deep. "What brought you here in the first place?" Jake suddenly chimed in, his innocence cutting through the dark atmosphere. "Why are you still fighting?" The elder biker's expression softened for a moment, almost vulnerable. When you've got nothing left to lose, you fight for anything that still holds value. Often, that's family or a place that feels like home. Hank's heart ached. The truth glimmered in their words, bonding them in shared struggles despite the harshness of their lives. There was a flicker of recognition and understanding, a link growing stronger amidst the uncertainty. They were all warriors at heart, battling different demons. As the conversation flowed, each word shaping their path, Hank felt the initial dread ebbing away, replaced by something he hadn't anticipated, a sense of possibility. They could be the architects of change, a bridge to repair what the world had broken. But as the wind rustled through the trees, a cold reminder lingered at the edges of hope. Trust needed time, and their pasts had a way of crawling back into the light. Little did they know, lurking in the shadows, a threat was already preparing. What nightmares awaited them, and could they handle whatever was about to unfold? Hank's pulse raced, not just from the tension surrounding them, but from the weight of the moment. They were standing on a brink, a line drawn between desolation and hope. The laughter from the group behind him felt like an echo of something they desperately needed, a sense of belonging, a family. But could they truly trust these bikers, or was this merely another cruel twist of fate? The elder biker leaned back a little, surveying the faces that surrounded the fire. "You know, it ain't easy relying on others," he said, glancing at Jake. "Kids like him should never have to worry about what's out there." "That's why we've got to be stronger," Hank replied, fueled by the young boy's gaze. "If we're going to get through this, we must do it as one." The younger biker, arms crossed and still looking skeptical, nodded slowly. "And every family's got its problems, don't they? We can either face them together or watch them tear us apart." As the flames danced higher, Hank saw glimpses of vulnerability in the biker's eyes. These tough men had layers. Each scar on their weathered hands told tales of burdens they bore. In that moment, the barriers began to crack, letting in the softer currents of understanding. Jake, feeling the gravity of their newfound alliance, whispered to Hank, "Are they really going to help us?" His voice trembled, and Hank felt a surge of determination rise within him. "They're ours."
"Best shot, buddy, but we need to be smart and ready for anything," Hank reassured him, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A moment of silence settled over the group, everyone locked in their thoughts. Then, from the edges of the dimly lit clearing, a rustling broke through the air, a sound that prickled the skin on the back of Hank's neck. The encouragement they found in each other faded, leaving behind an unsettling knot of fear. "Did you hear that?" Joe asked softly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the tree line. The tension escalated, and the bikers instinctively shifted, some reaching for their jackets, the older one casting an alert glance toward the dark shadows lurking behind the trees. "Stay close, everyone," Hank called, repositioning himself protectively in front of Jake. He felt the boy's small body trembling against him, a reminder of the world they were caught in, a world where safety had become a luxury. Then, out of the night, a low growl echoed, sending every heart racing. The shadows morphed into shapes, creeping closer, and a mixed sense of dread and adrenaline flooded through Hank's veins. "Just an animal," the elder biker reassured brusquely, but even he felt the tremors in his voice. But fear isn't always logical, and in moments of uncertainty, visions of past horrors flickered in Hank's mind. He thought of neighbors who had disappeared overnight, of people disappearing from their lives like smoke. Suddenly, the alliance they had built felt fragile, exposed to the very forces they were trying to withstand. The rustling grew louder, and it was no longer clear if the sound belonged to a mere animal. The frozen tableau of unity began to unravel, and anxiety rippled through Hank's instincts. "Whatever it is, we're not backing down," Hank declared, steadying his voice. "We're in this together." As the shape stepped out of the shadows, eyes gleaming in the moonlight, Hank found himself at a crossroads between confrontation and fear, trust and uncertainty. What emerged could change everything they had just begun to build. And then, all at once, the tension snapped. Would they face the unknown together, or split apart at the seams. The shadows shifted, taking on a darker shape, as something emerged, revealing itself in the flickering light of the fire. Hank's heart pounded in his chest. The rest of the group held their collective breath. Through the haze of smoke, a figure crouched low, the glint of eyes revealing a creature, a dirty, thin dog with matted fur and a whimper that vibrated through the air. It had wandered too far from somewhere, perhaps a victim of the same dismal fate as they all felt. The breath Hank had been holding escaped in a rush, relief flooding his senses, but still the tension lingered. Just a dog, Hank breathed out, feeling the weight on his shoulders lift just a bit. But Jake remained transfixed, his small face a mixture of worry and kindness, emotions colliding in his innocent eyes. "Is it hurt?" he asked, stepping slightly forward, his instincts as gentle as ever. "I don't know, buddy," Hank replied. "Let's check it out, but be careful." The pitiful creature stumbled toward them, its tail a mere flicker of hope against its gaunt body. The elder biker knelt down, reaching out a hand cautiously. "Easy there," he murmured, his gruff voice softer now. He looked over at Jake, his gaze shifting back to the dog, recalling something deep within his own past. The other bikers exchanged glances, a subtle shift in their demeanor. This moment seemed to resonate, drawing them closer, wrapped in a shared sense of compassion. As they inspected the dog, Hank felt the bonds between them tighten, fraying anxieties giving way to the possibility of connection. If they could care for this animal, perhaps they had it in them to care for each other, to trust again. "This little guy's been through hell," Joe said, examining a wound on the dog's paw. "We can't just leave him here." "Sounds like a plan," Hank agreed, embracing that moment of unity. "We'll take care of him." The atmosphere shifted. Laughter broke through the tension as they shared stories about their pets from when they were kids. Voices rose as they joked and teased each other, slowly dismantling the weight surrounding them. The laughter echoed like a familiar melody, bringing warmth back toward the center of the fire and their hearts. Jake's eyes sparkled as he bent down, offering a piece of his sandwich to the trembling dog. The creature cautiously approached, taking the offering with timid gratitude. For a fleeting moment, Hank saw joy bloom on Jake's face, a glimpse of innocence amidst the chaos. But just as warmth wrapped around them, harsh reality kicked back in. The rustling returned, more pronounced this time. A low growl, deeper and more threatening. Hank's heart fell again, their reprieve cut short by the dire reminder of their situation. "Stay alert," the elder biker warned, stepping back. They had become distracted, forgetting the shadows that loomed beyond their firelight. The group instantly shifted, rekindling their defensive posture. Tension crackled again like the fire before them, and eyes began to dart toward the trees, tracking the encroachers lurking just out of sight. As the growling intensified, Hank felt the dog shrink against Jake's leg, a courageous attempt to find safety in its new hero. "What now?" Hank whispered, feeling the weight of the dog's small body in his mind, a fragile shot of hope wrapped in fur amidst the darkness. The uncertainty pressed in once more. What prowled beneath the leaves? Would they face whatever it was together, or would the fear tear them back into isolation? Just as a figure emerged from the tree line, cloaked in shadow, Hank took a deep breath, his heart racing again. Was it friend or foe? "I guess we're about to find out," he thought, pulse pounding louder than the growls echoing around them. The figure stepped into the flickering firelight, and Hank's breath caught in his throat. It was a man, tall and broad, wearing a leather jacket, adorned with patches that marked him as an outsider, and definitely not one of the Hell's Angels. The tension surged like a charged storm, the air thick with apprehension. "Who the hell are you?" Joe growled, muscles coiled and ready for anything. The bikers shifted closer together, forming a protective barrier around Hank and Jake. The newcomer raised his hands, palms out. "Hold on, I'm not here to cause trouble." His voice was rough, but carried an urgency that resonated through the gathered crowd. "I just need a moment of your time." Hank felt his instincts flare. Depending on this stranger could put everything they had just begun to build at risk. "What do you want?" he replied, his own voice steady but laced with caution. "I've been hearing whispers," the man continued, stepping forward tentatively. "Rumors about something darker lurking in these parts, about you and your kid." He locked eyes with Hank, the connection sudden and disarming. "There's a guy coming, someone who doesn't care about the past or whether you found a place to belong." Every member of the group shifted, the atmosphere changing yet again. Hank shot a worried glance at Jake, who was still clasping the dog's back, as if looking for comfort in the tiny creature. They had found a flicker of hope, a connection. Was it about to be extinguished? "What do you know?" Joe asked, stepping up alongside Hank, his posture aggressive. The man took a breath, steadying himself. "I've dealt with him before. He'll come looking for blood. He wants to settle old scores. And you," he pointed at Hank with a sense of urgency, "are on his list." Hank's heart sank. "Why? What did I ever do to him?" "It doesn't matter," the man shrugged, desperation evident in his eyes. "You're part of a past he can't let go. I came to warn you. You need to stand together. You need to fight." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of truth. Hank glanced around at the bikers beside him. Their faces were wary but intrigued. He saw the flicker of determination reflecting back, the realization that they too had their own battles and burdens. "Are you saying we should confront him?" Hank asked, the question laced with the same fear he had felt all along. "Fight or run," the man replied bluntly. "But if you choose to run, it won't be just you who pays the price. Everyone here," he gestured to the gathering, "everyone's got a past. Only together can you change it." Taking a deep breath, Hank turned to Jake, his son's wide eyes filled with both worry and hope. Could they really face this head on? Were they ready to stand with each other in the face of looming danger, without leaving their fears behind? "All right," Hank said, voice firm. "If we're going to do this, we do it together." Joe nodded, his expression resolute. The other bikers echoed their agreement, standing tall, each one of them connected through shared stories, struggles, and newfound trust. The community they were beginning to form felt more powerful than any threat that loomed outside their gathering circle. The newcomer nodded appreciatively. "Stick together, and you might just pull through. I'll keep watch. The shadows are gathering outside." As the group began preparing, bikes revving and voices strategizing, the dog nestled securely next to Jake, as if sensing the shift in their shared atmosphere. Hank felt a determination surge through him, larger than fear, larger than regret. They had come together for something real, deeper than any past wounds. They were family, now bound not only by struggle, but also by their willingness to fight for each other. "Remember," Hank said, raising his voice over the din, "we're not just fighting for ourselves anymore. We're fighting for the bonds we forged and the support we found. We're stronger together." Cheers erupted, echoing into the night. The shadows started to move, but they weren't lingering anymore with fear. They were preparing. Together. And as they stood ready, Hank felt that they were not just facing the darkness that had threatened to consume them. They were stepping toward the light. No more shadows, no more solitude. They would protect what they had created. This was their moment, their chance for transformation. They had grown, evolved, and found purpose, together. And just like that, Hank knew this was the legacy he would leave for Jake. Courage, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of family. Together, they could conquer the world. But now was the time to act. As the shadows lunged forward, they could either succumb to fear or embrace the fight ahead. And fight they would. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your reactions and feelings about this incredible transformation. Don't wait, not even one more second, to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Together, they could conquer the world. But now was the time to act. As the shadows lunged forward, they could either succumb to fear or embrace the fight ahead. And fight they would. And subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your reactions and feelings about this incredible transformation. Don't wait, not even one more second, to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. True fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.